Continuing with the economics of war, conflict, and peace, now let's take the example of the Palestine. I use the word Palestine advisedly and not Israel um, or the Gaza Strip or West Bank because broadly it is the area of Palestine for thousands of years. Jews claim that they had the Judea and the Smartia 3,000 years ago and they have been living from there. We don't want to go into that particular controversy for long, except to say that Jews started moving in the 1930s in this area. At that time, it was all occupied by Palestinians. There is a city called Jerusalem, which is holy for three religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Though it could be Judaism of a particular kind, Christianity of a particular kind, Islam of a particular kind. But there also we don't go into issues like Sunni, Shia, and Orthodox Church and Protestant Church and Catholic Church and so on, because that is not worth doing it. Broadly, these are the religions which had occupied it. And the Jews had no homeland for a few thousand years, actually. So they started coming. And by 1947, they had first conflict with the Palestinians, Nakba. And 48, the UN passed a resolution assigning a particular area to the Jews and the rest of the areas for what they called non-Jews. But actually, it's basically the Palestinians who were living there, and small number of Christians, but they said it that way. The Palestinians who were living there at that time, obviously in majority, didn't accept it, and finally, because of the conflict there, they have to move out, and about 1 million Palestinians moved out and became refugees. Many of them are still living in refugee camps, including in Gaza. And over a period of time, the diaspora of Palestinians is something like 4 million persons, maximum in Jordan, about 2 million, about 1 million in Egypt, and about 1 million in other places. Therefore, at that point of time, it was a new home for them. They celebrated it. The Zionist movement, which wanted a home for the Jews, had won out, and the basis was the Balfour Declaration in 1917, just after the First World War. And there were a number of cities which were Palestinian cities. They acquired the Jewish names and so on. There was a lot of agriculture areas, and both sides of the argument, if you look at it, progressively it all got owned by Jews or Jewish organizations or settlement groups and something like that. And it was not acquired by force of arms. It was mostly bought because at the time of the UN resolution, 30% of the area Palestinians were living in, 70% area was under the protectorate of the British. They were the protectors of the area, and vast stretches of land which were agriculturally not productive were owned by Syrian landlords and other Arab landlords and so on. And the local Palestinians did not buy those unproductive lands because if you are going to do agriculture, you have to see what it is worth and you have to have capital. Having said this, the beauty of the place of holy city for 3 religions also became a bone of contention. And I don't spend too much time here in that, but its relevance remains where whenever they talk about one nation and two nations and theory, then the Jews want, or Israel wants East Jerusalem to become their capital. and that is where the holy places of the two other religions are also there. Now, having said this, there have been two organizations mostly, though factions are there and factions keep on fighting with each other. There have been more than a dozen conflicts, but the ones in 56, 67, 73 are the major ones. And in this century, we can say that it started in 2000 or so on, but the latest was 2014. And the statistics are available, where it shows that the number of Palestinians killed were many, many times more than the Israelis. I don't want to use the word Jews, because Israel as a country has Palestinians also and Christians also. So now coming to the economics part of it, the Israelis, wherever they have this, their quote-unquote country and plus the occupied territories, have in this century grown very well. They are into high-tech industries. They make military equipment. They are a center now of the diamond and semi-precious industry, cutting of it and shaping of it and then marketing of it. And incidentally, India is very deeply involved in that, because the major cutting of the lower end or middle end and middle end is done in India, in a place called Surat in Gujarat. And so that economic bond is very, very strong now. That whole industry, which is global industry, is kind of controlled by Israel. Earlier it used to be Belgium in Brussels. It's controlled in Israel. And India is the low end, medium end value addition person. So link is very high. So we will specifically look at this also. Does this conflict impact that value chain or supply chain? And therefore, India, can it go against Israel? Would it go against Israel? A second major thing is that there are a number of ports, but one of the best ports is Haifa port. It has also become part of the IMEC project. Now, Haifa port is bought by an Indian business house, Adani's, but has a Chinese share also. And if we look at the connect of that IMEC port to the Piraeus in Greece, then the story becomes clearer, because that port is the other end in the Europe of this IMEC project, which was announced after G20, and that is owned by the Chinese. So the supply chain relationships can be seen very well. Haifa therefore becomes very, very important to have another route where from west coast of India, shipping is there to a port in Saudi Arabia or UAE, and from there by train it goes to Haifa, and from Haifa it goes by ship again. So shorter connection, cheaper connection to Europe of both the Middle East and Israel included, India and the Europe connection, and going to the port which is owned by, both ports are therefore owned by the Asians. The whole chain is therefore owned by the Asians. Okay, now, so if we look at the estimate of Bloomberg, what they're saying is that conflict between Israel and Hamas, which broke out in the first week of October, has the potential to disrupt the world economy. So if this is one line statement which has to be made, and recession will be there if more countries are drawn in. We have given a link for this, and no one wants to read more, one can read more. So this is the one line, bottom line statement. Small country Israel, non-powerful and suppressed Gaza people or even West Bank people, but they having conflict has the potential, first of all, to expand it to the proxy war, which is, that means Syria and Lebanon get involved, because Lebanon has the basis of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah supports in West Bank, and the control in the West Bank is of the PLO party, but let's say Palestinian Authority, which has some recognition in the international world. It is has observer status in UN also. And then, if via the Hezbollah, if Israel were not to stop, not to go for ceasefire and all that, so then Hezbollah may be pushed to open the front to West Bank. Both of them have rockets, etc. It is claimed that Iran supplies a lot of these things, and therefore, like the previous wars, Lebanon got pulled into it, Syria got pulled into it, and then Iran gets pulled into it. And therefore it becomes a regional war, regional conflict. To what extent other Arab countries will get pulled in, I don't know. Because the speed of response has been very high. From 8th October till yesterday, more than 10,000 persons, mostly civilians, mostly children and women, have died in Gaza Strip. And Israelis, about 1,400 died in the first onslaught, and maybe few hundred later on, because the bombardment has been from the air basically, and yet the ground operation is not really on. So therefore, in any assessment, one would look at what is the probabilities of these things becoming next level, and therefore the probabilities of the impact on various economies and the global economy also. Till now, mostly they are confined to Gaza and Israel. Of course, everything is very unfortunate. Even one death is unfortunate, but here about 1,000 deaths were taking place. Now its level has come down to about 100 per day. But if the spillover is there, if Israel does not respond, there is a United Nations General Assembly resolution that there should be ceasefire, there should be stoppage of hostilities, at least for the humanitarian aid, because Israel has put a pressure for people to evacuate from Gaza Strip so that they can take care of the Hamas group. And more than 1 million people have left, but they have nothing else. On the road also they get killed and so on and so forth. So they are being pushed more and more and more, and nobody from the Israel has given an impression that they want to reduce these hostilities. On the other hand, for the first time, there is very substantial protests which are taking place all over the world. Turkey, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Washington, a number of other states in USA, London, various European cities, Kerala city in India, Kerala state in India, and so on.